The DGMOs talk, but I think it has to be widened. There has to be political contact, there has to be contact at the diplomatic level. At the moment, really there is no contact. So that is the point. Uri. Well, you know, it's become very standard in India. Moment something goes off, the blame is made directly on Pakistan and Pakistan government or the ISI. So I think there is a sort of a feeling in Pakistan that this is now becoming a bit of a joke. For instance, you take Pathankot. When it happened, our Prime Minister was in, I think he was in Colombo. He made a phone call to Prime Minister Modi and offered assistance, and I think our team went. I'm not in the government, so I have reasons to believe that the evidence was not really objective. So I think why Pakistan did not make a statement on Uri, maybe the government felt that it was not necessary. I'd like to know how many statements India makes when things go off in Pakistan. Pakistan has had more attacks in the country. You know about the attacks on various military installations. What purpose whose interest was it to see that those military assets were destroyed? I'm referring to the one in Karachi where the AWACS were attacked, and where these aircraft were specifically attacked in the base in Karachi. So what I'm saying is that we don't have to react to every single event.
The IISS is not a state, and we don't have an intelligence organisation of our own. So I've got no privileged insight into the Uri incident. I've looked at the media reporting and analysis in both countries. My personal assessment is something happened, and the Indians would not have attempted to bluff this. I don't believe, because bluffing that's caught out, if you're trying to do military coercion, bluffing that's caught out is very negative. It undermines whatever you're trying to achieve. You raised the suggestion about whether the UN could have a further role in investigating ceasefires. I'm not an expert on the role, but I understand that the UN gets more cooperation from Pakistan than India, which is regrettable. I mean, I've personally investigated ceasefire violations in Bosnia myself, and I think that potentially is a useful course. Whether, of course, in the Security Council there will be enough support for that, and the Security Council members that supported it could prevail upon India to cooperate more, and I think that's an open question. I was asked a very sensible question about could coercion persuade the Pakistani government to crack down more intensively on anti-Indian non-state actors. Well, we don't know, but there's a great danger that the coercion might arouse a popular backblast in Pakistan against this. Of course, my analysis was quite simple. There is potentially another strategic objective of an Indian strike, which would be to directly attack the non-state armed group to reduce its capability. Now, whether that would have an effect and how much capability it would reduce, we can only speculate. But such a strike would be very unlikely to destroy the non-state armed group. Coercion sometimes has worked in history, sometimes it's not. A warning from recent history is the 2006 war in Lebanon, where Israel attempted to coerce the Lebanese government to constrain Hezbollah when the Lebanese government effectively could not do it. The other thing I think would be in the mind of an Indian military strategic planner would be well, if we want to change Pakistan's behaviour and have the government work harder to suppress anti-Indian non-state armed groups, then actually destroying any significant capability of the Pakistani armed forces, particularly the Army, the Air Force and ISI, works directly against that. And that factor might limit Indian military planning, but whether in the hothouse, febrile atmosphere in the Indian media and the body politic that might result in this, how much that would influence political calculations, I don't know. And the final question by the lady from the NDU, I apologise, I didn't quite understand it, but as we understand it in our ISS, Pakistan's short-range, low-yield nuclear capability is optimised against a large-scale attack by India. That's not to say it couldn't have other utility, but I think if there are plans being made for coercion in Delhi, a large-scale ground invasion is probably seen very much as the last resort. Partly because it would be something that's very difficult to back away from. And my judgment also is that such an Indian operation might be very much more difficult than is often imagined.
Thank you. Next set of questions. On the right side, the gentleman at the end.
Thank you very much, sir. My name is Rahul. Basically, and my question is directed to Honorable Riaz Kokar. As we all agree that there is no structured mechanism between the two countries to come to some sort of negotiating forum which is permanent and sustainable. And we also, all the worthy speakers have brought up one point, that there is disconnect or disconnection in communicating to each other or dialogue with each other. Now, that being the baseline, I think we every time go to square one and forget about the international angle that both these countries have in their mutual relations for settlement, resolution, and initiation of dialogue. If history is any guide,
could you please ask your question?
Sir, I'm coming to
instead
that.
of guiding us from history?
I'm coming to that point. So my question, I come to the question because the premise is I think important to understand, to put the question in the right perspective. Now, having come to that point again, and we have seen the history that bilateral dialogues have always failed, disconnected, or starved. Now, don't you think that since the basic dispute of Kashmir is also on the UN agenda, there is a need of international arbitration by either the US or Russia or any other country to some sort of bring the two countries to negotiating table. Thank you.
Thank you. On the left side, you have already asked a question. Is there anybody else on this side? You have the floor.
Thank you, sir. So this is Ahmad Khan from National Science University. I have a question to Dr. Hassan Askari. Sir, if we see in the past few months that, especially after the Dawn leaks, which highlighted major differences between civil-military leadership on tackling a militant group operating in Pakistan. So how do you see this relationship, which are at low level, which has some sort of impact on the Indo-Pak relationship in future?
Who is the question addressed to? Pastor Cook. Pastor Cooper? Was it to Mr. Askari? Okay. Let me see if there is any other gentleman who did you ask a question? No, you didn't. You have the floor.
Thank you. Matthew Harries from the IISS. My question is for Ambassador Cook, and it's on the topic of third-party involvement, which you suggested was not would not be necessary or welcome at this point in the bilateral relationship. One third party that has been influential in the past, especially in times of crisis, is the United States. So my question is, what implications do you see from the change of administrations in the United States for this bilateral relationship, especially in a time of tensions and potential crisis.
Anybody else? Both of you have, I think, previously asked.
You didn't let me ask the second. You didn't let me ask the second question as well, and I had been respectful enough.
Okay, sure.
So I have a question for both Brigadier Barry and Mr. Rahul. So I believe it's my personal opinion, so I might be mistaken. The question is, why can't India realize, and the British as well, that the Kashmir problem is an unfinished agenda left by the British when the shameful flight from the British India happened? So why they don't really try to get any solution possible, whether that is partition or independence of Kashmir or whatever solution that is? So come for a solution, because Pakistan and India can't move forward if the Kashmir problem is not really solved. Thank you.
Thank you. Yes, sir.
Thank you. I just have an appendix to Matthew's question. I mean, is there a role for China?
Is there?
Is there a role for China?
The first question about I'm a strong advocate of bilateral dialogue, but as you know, Kashmir is on the agenda of the United Nations, been on the agenda of the Security Council. The option is not closed. It's a question of when the situation is right. Perhaps that would be exercised, but this is really for the government to decide. Pakistan is not opposed to mediation. Pakistan, I'm not talking about my own position. Pakistan is not opposed to mediation or third-party facilitation. And we've said this repeatedly. We have talked about United Nations mediating. We've talked about other friends of India and Pakistan mediating. But my personal view is it doesn't really work. It hasn't worked in the past. India's standard position is that they are not interested in any third-party mediation. That is the Indian position. So you cannot have a mediation if one party doesn't agree. Role of China, I don't know if that question was meant for me. I don't think China really has a role, because China and India may have good economic relations, etc., but they're also, in a way, they're adversaries. So, and I can't see India really trusting the Chinese. The ultimate analysis, as I said earlier also, both countries have to talk to each other. In the past, attempts have been made. I mean, there was this Swaran-Singh talks which went on for 5 or 6 rounds, I think. Of course, it did not end in any constructive results, but at least an attempt was made. We've had the back channel during President Musharraf's time. Some spade work was done, and that's not off the table. And it can only come back on the table if there is a dialogue, if there is a serious dialogue on the part of both sides. We have to, I think that is the element, sincerity and seriousness. And only then there is a possibility that some kind of modus vivendi can be worked out.
There was something about what are your expectations?
Trump is, of course, a great unknown, so really I would want to speculate.
Thank you. I think Mr. Hassan Askari will.
I think the question was about the news item leak, which attempted to reflect a divergence between the civil and military on how to treat India, how to deal with India. The contents have been, rejected by both sides, but nevertheless, leave that their rejection on one side. What that leak reflects is a kind of competition between the civil and the military, and the civilian desire to assert their primacy. Therefore, it has everything to do with the domestic politics of Pakistan. So far as the relation with India is concerned, India's persistent criticism of Pakistan and also persistent diplomatic pressure on Pakistan has made it extremely difficult for anybody from the dominant Pakistani elite, civil or military, to show flexibility. India can be helpful only if there is some element of flexibility. If there is no flexibility, even Prime Minister, with all his telephone calls to Modi, will not be able to do anything.
Thank you. Rahul, would you like to respond to this accusation against Britain of creating problems in Kashmir and Pakistan?
I'm going to leave the accusation to Ben Barry about the UK side, but let me just respond to the question about Kashmir and India. You know, if there's one central point of what I've said today, it is that there needs to be the resumption of the official bilateral dialogue. There is no question